Hello. We have been discussing about the early Greek philosophers. We continue with yet the other founder of Eleatic school, Parmenides, in today's discussion, who is also known as the father of Eleaticism. This is Dr. Ananya Barua, Associate Professor in the Department of Philosophy, Hindu College. Now, who is the father of Eleatic school? The Eleatic school comes after the Milesian school, starting from Thales and Anaximander and Anaximenes and other stalwarts. We have the second school known as Eleaticism, and by and large it is Parmenides 515 to 450 BCE who is recognized as the father of Eleatic school. So, Parmenides was a pre-Socratic Greek philosopher from Elea in southern Italy, a Greek colony. He is regarded as one of the most influential figures in the history of Western metaphysics. He is the author of the poem On Nature, which lays out his central metaphysical doctrine, the notion that being, B-E-I-N-G, being is, and that not being is not and cannot even be thought of or spoken about. So, Parmenides' radical contribution redefined philosophy by emphasizing about a rational argument over sensory perception. He emphasized on ontology, which is the study of being, as the core philosophy. The use of logical necessity and deductive reasoning is yet the other contribution of Parmenides. Now, the question is, why is Parmenides called the founder of Eleaticism? Parmenides is the founder of the Eleatic school because he established the philosophical principle of radical monism, that only being exists and all change, motion and plurality are illusions. His followers, Zeno of Elea, Melissus and others, expanded and defended these views, forming the Eleatic school named after the city Elea. Now, if we see at the PPT here, which is being displayed, the features of the Eleatic school, we see that the first feature is of radical monism. Now, what does radical monism describe? It is about reality is one, there is only one unchanging being. The second feature is about the denial of change, which is change is impossible since it implies that something becomes what it was not, that is, from non-being, which is unthinkable. The third feature is non-being is not. The feature here means that not being, which is the antithesis of being, the hero of Eleatic school, cannot exist or even be spoken or thought about because the only wholesome truth is being. The other feature of Eleaticism is rationalism over empiricism, which means that sensory experience is deceptive. Only reason and logic can reveal truth. Now, further, the other feature of Eleaticism is about logical deduction, which describes Parmenides and Zeno, who used strict logical reasoning, and very famously we have Zeno's paradoxes to defend their worldview. Being is eternal and indivisible, which is that there is no division in being. It is whole, continuous and ungenerated. So, if we are to now fathom or compare the earlier schools, we see the Milesian school of the 6th century BCE, founded in Miletus, Ionia, which is in the modern day Turkey, includes thinkers like Thales, Anaximander and Anaximenes. They were the first philosophers of ancient Greece. Now the features of Milesian is in stark contrast to Eleaticism. For example, in the Milesian school, the feature of material monism was very much prevalent, and that is being replaced by radical monism here. So, material monism of the Milesians was about the belief that a single physical substance underlies all things, be it water, be it air, be it apeiron. The other feature of the Milesian school was about the empirical observation, which relied on senses and observation of the natural world. Unlike in the Eleaticism, there is a focus of rationalism over empiricism. We also find the feature of change is real in the Eleatic school, which means that change and motion are natural and must be explained. On the other hand, in Eleaticism, as just about discussed, it is said that being is eternal and indivisible, which is that there is no division in being. It is whole, continuous and ungenerated. Thus, there is a denial of change in Eleaticism school, where change is impossible. It is impossible that something becomes what it was not. From not being to which it is unthinkable. Further, about the Milesian school, the focus has been on cosmological, where they focused on cosmology, physics and nature, how the world arises and functions. Eleaticism, on the other hand, focuses on the ontological concept of being. Last but not the least, the origin or the feature of Milesian school has been about the origin of the cosmos, where they sought naturalistic explanations for the origin of the universe without resorting to myth. But in the Eleatic school, we see the relevance of the logical deduction, where the Parmenides and Zeno used strict logical reasoning to defend their worldview. And as said, for them being is eternal and indivisible. There is no division in being. It is whole, continuous and ungenerated. So now that we are clear with the focus or the comparison of the Milesian school and the Eleatic school, we can quickly have a look at the PPT as being displayed here, which is the distinction between the Eleatic school versus the Milesian school. Now, about the aspect or the core idea, the Eleatic school by Parmenides, Zeno, Melissus, they all have said that being is one, unchanging, eternal. Milesian school, on the other hand, from the stalwarts like Thales, Anaximander and Anaximenes, their core idea is about reality arises from a basic physical element. Now, the view on change from the Eleatic school is that change is impossible and illusory. Milesian school, on the other hand, connotes that change is real and must be expanded naturally. Now, about the method of both the schools, Eleatic school we find the logical deduction, the rational argument. Milesian school we see that there is about observation and speculation about natural causes. The view on perception we see with Eleatic school, it distrusts the senses, it's deceptive in nature. But for the Milesians, they were clear that they rely more on sense data. The metaphysical position of the Eleatic school talks about the ontological monism where only being is. Milesian school, on the other hand, talks about the material monism where one substance causes all things. Further, when we talk about the aim of the Eleatic school, we see that it discovers what truly exists. Milesians, on the other hand, explain how things come to be. Last but not the least, about the nature of reality, the Eleatic school is all about abstractness, timeless and immobility or immobile. On the other hand, the Milesian school talks about the nature of reality as physical, dynamic and evolving. So, we see that Parmenides' Eleaticism asserts that being is eternal and unchanging, and that rational thought alone can access truth, a stark contrast to the Milesians who sought the origin of the cosmos in changing material substances through observation and reason combined. Now that we kind of have understood how Eleaticism is distinct from the Milesian school, and that Parmenides has been the father of Eleatic school, we are good to go with the work of Parmenides. Now, the very basic or the primary work of Parmenides is the most celebrated work, which is entitled as On Nature and the Notion of Being. Now, this work on nature is basically a poem. Now, this poem has the structure and mythic philosophical form. So, Parmenides of Elea had composed Periphysios, or in other words, on nature, in a hexameter verse, which is a format traditionally reserved for epic poetry like Homer and Hesiod. But he transformed mythic form into rational metaphysics. The poem is structured in 3 parts. The first part of the poem is called as the proem, P-R-O-E-M, proem. Proem is the opening journey in a poem. Parmenides begins with a visionary allegory. A chariot drawn by mares carries him beyond the realm of mortals into the heavens, where he meets a goddess. This journey symbolizes the soul's departure from the world of opinion, doxa, into truth, aletheia. The goddess, often interpreted as a personification of reason or truth, tells Parmenides that she will reveal 2 parts. So that is the first part, the proem. Now, the 2 parts that the goddess promises Parmenides that she will reveal include aletheia and secondly, doxa. Now, what is this aletheia? Aletheia, the goddess says, is the way of truth. This is the core of Parmenides' philosophy. The notion of being is central, the goddess declares. It is necessary to say and to think that being is, for being is, but nothing is not, unquote. Further, the key principles of being thus are: being is ungenerated and imperishable, that is, it did not come from nothing and it cannot vanish. Being is whole, complete and unchanging. There is no non-being into which it can move or transform. Being is one, continuous and indivisible. That is, it is multiplicity, motion and change are illusions. Thinking and being are the same. To think is to think something that is. You cannot think nothing. So we see that in summary, what is, what is not, and cannot even be thought of is the radical claim, which rejects all change, diversity and becoming. The point of Parmenides is only being is, not being is not. Now, the other way that the goddess introduces him is the way of opinion or doxa, which is the world of appearances. Parmenides now turns to the beliefs of mortals. He acknowledges that humans believe in change, motion, plurality, day-night, fire, water. But this is merely illusion, a plausible tale, not the truth. He explains how mortals wrongly combine being and non-being to explain the world. So, the way of opinion or doxa, the world of appearances, is yet out of generosity or perhaps irony. The goddess offers a cosmology of appearances, a world with 2 opposite forces, often interpreted as light and night, whose interaction gives rise to the seeming multiplicity of things. This part foreshadows later thinkers like Empedocles, Anaxagoras, and the atomists, who tried to reconcile appearance and reason. Now we know that the Parmenides' notion of being, the philosophical significance, the core idea is that being is thus eternal, unchanging, indivisible, and logically necessary. This is a radical break from Heraclitus, who affirmed perpetual change. You cannot step into the same river twice. Parmenides instead negates change altogether. Now we see that the influence on later thinkers of Parmenides have had a deep influence on Plato. Plato, influenced by Parmenides' strict logic of being and non-being, in The Sophist he wrestles with the problem, how can we speak meaningfully of what is not? On Aristotle, he responds in Metaphysics by attempting to preserve both being and becoming through substance and potentiality. Heidegger sees Parmenides as the first to ask the question of being authentically. Being and thinking are the same becomes a foundational insight. Modern logic and metaphysics, the notion that contradictions cannot exist, non-contradiction, has deep roots in Parmenides. Now, when we talk about some of the key fragments in B2 and B8, there are quotes like, within quotes, "Come now, and I will tell you, and hear my saying, and carry it away. The only ways to inquire that are to be thought, that it is and that it is not possible for it not to be, is the path of persuasion, for it attains upon truth. The other, that it is not and that it is right, it should not be. This, I tell you, is a path wholly unknowable." Unquote. This is from fragment B2, and there is yet another very interesting fragment from B8, and it says, quote, "It neither was nor will be, since it is now altogether one continuous." Unquote. So we see that in summary, for element of being, Parmenides' view is that it is, capital I, capital S, it is, and being is and thus unchanging and eternal. Non-being, in comparison to being, is something which cannot be thought or spoken of. Change, for Parmenides' view, is illusion. Multiplicity, thus, again is an illusion. Thinking, for Parmenides, is identical with being. Truth, for Parmenides, is accessible only through reason, not senses. Now, at this juncture, we are good to go about or understand about the methodology used by Parmenides. Parmenides' methodology is unique and revolutionary in early Greek philosophy. Unlike the Milesians, who used observation and speculative reasoning to explain cosmic origins, Parmenides introduced a strict method of logical deductive reasoning grounded in the principles of being and truth. So then, what is the methodology in Parmenides? Parmenides' methodology is the way he arrives at the conclusion that only being is and else non-being, change, multiplicity is illusion. His methodology is thus ontological, which is to speak about what is, logical, which is what it must be, and epistemological, which is what can be known or thought. So we see that the methodology of Parmenides is a trilogy of ontology, logic, and epistemology. He breaks from traditional empirical or cosmological speculation and introduces a pure rational method. This earns him the title Father of Metaphysical Reasoning, or the pioneer of deductive ontology. Now, the first feature of Parmenides' methodology is, number one, logical deduction from first principles. Parmenides begins with an axiomatic statement, quote, what is, what is not, unquote. From this, he deduces the nature of reality using logic only step by step. This is the first use of axiomatic deductive system in Western philosophy, similar to what Euclid later does in geometry. His method includes the law of identity, which is being in itself, the law of non-contradiction, being cannot not be, the law of the excluded middle, there is no third option between being and non-being. He reasons that if you can think of it, it must be. Therefore, you cannot think of non-being. Therefore, only being is, logically, necessarily, and absolutely. Parmenides thus derives metaphysical conclusions from linguistic, logical analysis. Secondly, radical rationalism over sensory empiricism is the second feature of his methodology. Parmenides claims that the senses deceive. Only reason or logos gives access to truth. He contrasts the two paths in his poem on nature, talking about aletheia and doxa. Aletheia, or the way of truth, is all about, it is based on reason and logic, it leads to the knowledge of being, it is all about certainty and necessity. On the other hand, the way of opinion, or doxa, talks about, or it is based on perception and belief. It leads to illusions of multiplicity and change, and it is all about appearance and confusion. He thus warns, quote, do not let habit, born of much experience, force you to cast a wandering eye and echoing ear and tongue along the path of seeming, unquote. Thus, his method is a radical shift from the naturalistic empiricism of previous philosophers. The third feature in Parmenides' methodology is the use of poetic philosophical allegory. Parmenides writes in epic hexameter, beginning with a mythical poem where a chariot carries him to the goddess of truth. This form is symbolic, yet also methodological. The chariot ride symbolizes the soul's ascent from the realm of doxa to aletheia. The goddess represents divine reason or truth, guiding the philosopher beyond appearances. Thus, myth is used not as explanation but as a didactic, allegorical method to dramatize the philosopher's path to truth. The fourth feature of Parmenides' methodology is the rejection of becoming as illogical. Through negative dialectic, Parmenides shows becoming requires non-being. A thing must come to be from what it was not. But not being cannot be thought or exist. Therefore, becoming is impossible. This is a method of reductio ad absurdum. He assumes the possibility of change, then shows that it leads to logical contradiction. The fifth feature of Parmenides' methodology is all about identity of thinking and being. Parmenides famously claims it is the same thing to think and to be. Fragment B3. This is not just a metaphysical claim, but also epistemological and methodological. Thought must have a content. That content must be something, which is being. Therefore, thought is limited to what is. It cannot grasp what is not. Thus, his method limits knowledge to what is logically necessary and ontologically real. Now, if we go ahead and take a look at the distinction between the Eleatic school versus the Milesian school, we see that the axiomatic premise vis-a-vis the methodology as displayed in the PPT is all about being is not, is non-being is not. The outcome is that it sets logical groundwork. In the deductive reasoning, it is about from identity and non-contradiction to the outcome of being is eternal and unchanging. Epistemic closure, we see all about thought is equivalent to being, and thought cannot exceed being. Sensory rejection, doxa is not equivalent to truth. Experience is illusory. Mythical framing, allegory of a journey to truth. Outcome is it marks shift from doxa to aletheia. So, the critical reflection on Parmenides' method now, when we talk about his contributions, we see that he had introduced deductive method to metaphysics, pioneered rationalism, distinguished truth from opinion, and he did set up a rigorous standard for philosophical reasoning. However, there are certain challenges too, which is his methodology is too rigid. It excludes all change and plurality. It conflates linguistic and metaphysical necessity. It ignores the value of empirical evidence. It leads to a dead-end ontology, and there is no room for motion, time, or life. Thus, to conclude, we can say that the legacy of Parmenides' methodology is that it is a turning point, yes. It moves philosophy from cosmic speculation to logical ontology, from mythos to logos. It shows that truth must be grounded not in perception but in reason, and to think well is to think what is and nothing else. So, this is all about Parmenides' introduction here. Thank you so much.